At my fiancé med school graduation party in Miami, funded by my $900 monthly and $6,000 per term, he told security, "She doesn't belong here." His mother laughed. "You thought you were part of this family?" I didn't argue. I just smiled, left without a scene, and made a silent plan he'd regret. "She doesn't belong here." The words sliced through the celebration noise, sharp and sudden like broken glass. I froze mid-step, champagne flute trembling in my hand as Kevin's voice, the same voice that had whispered forever against my skin countless nights, dismissed my existence with casual cruelty. His mother Diana's laughter followed, cold and cutting. "You thought you were part of this family? But I'm getting ahead of myself. That moment would come later. First, you need to understand who I really am. My name is Rachel Mitchell. To most people at Miami General Hospital, I'm just another overworked administrator making $900 a month, stretching every dollar to support my fiancé through medical school. The woman who brings homemade lunches in reused containers. The one who wears the same 3 professional outfits rotated carefully to appear like a diverse wardrobe. The eager-to-please girlfriend who somehow manages to transfer $6,000 each term to cover Kevin's tuition. What no one knows, what I've hidden meticulously for 3 years, is that I'm actually the only daughter of Arthur Mitchell, whose Mitchell Properties dominates the Miami skyline. That modest bank account I check anxiously in the hospital cafeteria? A carefully maintained facade. The real money sits in a trust fund that would make Kevin's jaw drop if he ever saw the balance. This morning followed the same exhausting routine. I woke at 5:30 a.m. in my small apartment. Yes, I maintain 2 residences, and dressed in a simple blouse I deliberately purchased from a discount store. The calculator came out as I pretended to balance my checkbook at the kitchen counter, creating the appearance of financial struggle that Kevin has come to expect. "Babe, don't forget I need the tuition payment by Friday," Kevin reminded me, not looking up from his medical journal. He lounged on my worn sofa, his designer watch, which he claimed was a replica, catching the morning light. "I've got it covered," I answered, just as I always do. He kissed my forehead absently before leaving. "You're the best. I don't know what I'd do without you." "Neither do I, Kevin. Neither do I." By 7 a.m. I was at my desk in the hospital administration office, processing medical billing claims. A job I'm actually overqualified for with my MBA from Wharton. But it's the perfect cover. No one questions why the boss's daughter would take a low-paying hospital position, because no one knows I'm the boss's daughter. At lunch, I stepped outside to take a different kind of call. "The Singapore investment is up 12%, I informed my father, speaking softly to ensure privacy. "We should move on the property near Brickell before the end of the quarter." "Rachel, this charade has gone on long enough," Arthur sighed, his voice conveying the familiar mixture of concern and frustration. "You're managing millions in real estate while pretending you can barely make rent. For what? A man who doesn't even know who you really are." "That's exactly why I need to do this, Dad," I replied, watching hospital staff walk past, none of them aware that the woman in the sensible shoes was in the middle of a multi-million-dollar negotiation. Kevin fell in love with me, not the Mitchell fortune. The silence from my father spoke volumes. "Friday night dinner as usual?" I asked, changing the subject. "Your room is always ready," he answered, his tone softening. "Margot's making your favorite." I smiled, thinking of our family's longtime housekeeper. "Tell her I'm looking forward to it." These Friday transitions are the most jarring part of my double life. I leave the hospital as Rachel the administrator, drive to a discreet parking garage, and change clothes in the back seat of my modest Honda. Then I transfer to the BMW I keep there, drive to my family's waterfront estate, and walk through those imposing doors as Rachel Mitchell, heiress and business prodigy. Last Friday I arrived to find my father in his study reviewing property assessments. He looked up as I entered, his expression brightening despite his worries. "There's my girl." He embraced me, then held me at arm's length. "You look tired, Rachel." "Double shift," I explained, settling into the leather chair across from him. "All this secrecy. It's not healthy," he said, pouring me a glass of wine from a bottle that cost more than my supposed monthly salary. "If this man truly loves you." "That's what I need to find out," I interrupted gently. "Love that's built on wealth isn't love at all. You taught me that after Mom died and the friends disappeared." The engagement ring caught the light as I reached for my wine glass. It was small, A quarter-carat diamond in a simple setting. Kevin had presented it with dramatic flair, claiming he'd saved for months. I cherished it more than the family jewels locked in our vault, believing it represented true sacrifice. What I didn't know then was that Kevin had purchased a Rolex for himself the very same week. "I've finally set a date," I told my father, changing the subject. "After Kevin's graduation ceremony next month at the celebration party. I've already purchased the penthouse overlooking the hospital campus. I'll give him the keys there, show him who I really am." Arthur's eyebrows rose. "And you're certain this is wise?" 3 years, Dad. 3 years of proving he loves me for me, not for what my last name can provide. Once he's a doctor, our lives can merge properly." My father didn't look convinced, but he respected my decision. The truth I couldn't admit even to myself at the time was that tiny doubts had begun to form, little inconsistencies in Kevin's stories, moments when his mask seemed to slip. The next morning found me back in administrator mode, reviewing budget reports at my desk when Kevin appeared unexpectedly. "Lunch?" he suggested, flashing the smile that had first made my heart skip. We sat in the hospital cafeteria, my homemade sandwich a stark contrast to the expensive takeout he'd brought. I watched him talk animatedly about a difficult diagnosis, trying to ignore the nagging question. Where did the money for those frequent takeout meals come from when he claimed crushing student debt? "I can't wait until we can afford real vacations," he said, gesturing with his fork. "No more of these budget constraints." I nodded, thinking of the keys to the penthouse hidden in my desk drawer at home, imagining his face when he realized the woman he'd chosen, regular, ordinary Rachel, could give him everything he'd dreamed of and more. "Just a few more weeks," I said softly. "Until graduation?" "God, yes." "Finally." "Until everything changes," I added, not knowing then just how prophetic those words would be. That evening I slipped away early, driving to the penthouse I'd purchased near the hospital. The graduation surprise that represented the merging of my two lives. Standing in that empty space with its floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Miami, I allowed myself to imagine our future here. The home we'd build once the pretense was gone, once he knew the real me. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd created this elaborate deception to ensure Kevin loved me authentically, not my fortune. But in doing so, I'd never allowed him to know the authentic Rachel at all. "Just a few more weeks," I whispered to the empty rooms, "and no more lies between us." I couldn't have known then that the only real lie in our relationship was the one I wasn't yet aware of, and it had nothing to do with my hidden wealth. The first time I noticed something genuinely wrong was on a Tuesday evening in March. Kevin had texted that he would be late, another study group for an important cardiology exam. I'd prepared his favorite pasta, timed perfectly for his usual 8 p.m. return. By 10:30 the food was cold and I was staring at my phone. When he finally arrived just before midnight, the scent of unfamiliar perfume clung faintly to his collar. Not overpowering, just present enough to notice when he leaned in to kiss my cheek. "The library was packed," he explained, dropping his bag by the door. "Dr. Winters is notorious for his trick questions." I nodded, not mentioning that I'd called the medical library at 9 p.m. and learned they'd closed early for maintenance. A small lie, perhaps, but it planted a seed of doubt that would grow with alarming speed. "There's pasta in the fridge," I said instead. "I grabbed something with the group," he replied, heading for the shower without another word. The next morning I found his wallet on the bathroom counter and did something I'd never done before. I looked inside. Behind his student ID was a receipt from Martino's, an upscale steakhouse downtown, time-stamped 8:27 p.m. $157 for 2 people. The study group appeared to have been very selective. This small discovery triggered a subtle shift in my awareness. Suddenly I began noticing patterns I'd been blind to before. The broke medical student narrative Kevin had carefully constructed started showing inconsistencies like a cheap sweater unraveling at the seams. "This place is so cramped," Kevin complained the following weekend, gesturing around my deliberately modest apartment. "I don't understand why you won't look for something better. Even on your salary there must be nicer options." "It's what I can afford," I answered simply, maintaining my cover while wondering why the apartment that had been cozy when we first met was now cramped 3 years later. "If you'd let me help with your resume, you could get a better paying position," he continued, scrolling through his phone. "Someone with your education should be making more." The irony of him offering career advice to the daughter of Arthur Mitchell, who managed a real estate portfolio worth hundreds of millions, wasn't lost on me. But something darker lurked beneath his sudden interest in my living situation. If I was supposedly struggling to make ends meet, why was he pushing me to stretch myself thinner with a more expensive apartment? 2 days later I found my answer. While searching for a missing earring in Kevin's overnight bag, my fingers brushed against a small velvet pouch. Inside was a pair of diamond stud earrings from Tiffany's, far more expensive than anything he'd ever given me. The receipt showed they'd been purchased just last week. My stomach twisted as I carefully replaced everything exactly as I'd found it. The earrings weren't meant for me, that much was obvious. But who were they for? And how could he afford such a luxury when I was supposedly covering his tuition? I said nothing but began paying closer attention to our finances. Kevin had always been vague about his student loans and family contributions. Now I discreetly tracked every dollar I gave him against his actual expenses. The numbers didn't add up. Thousands were disappearing into an unaccounted void. The hospital holiday party in December brought the next red flag. I'd spent weeks preparing, choosing a dress that was nice enough to be appropriate but not so expensive it would raise questions about my fictional budget. Kevin had been strangely reluctant to attend, claiming he needed to study, but finally agreed after I reminded him how important networking would be for his residency applications. We arrived separately. I'd been working late finalizing year-end reports. When I entered the ballroom, I spotted Kevin near the bar with a group of residents. Drawing closer, I heard him mid-conversation. Just waiting for the right opportunity after graduation. My roommate works in administration here, actually. There she is now. Roommate. Not fiancé. Not girlfriend. Roommate. He noticed me and his expression flickered momentarily before recovering. Rachel. I was just talking about you. He quickly corrected himself. By fiancé everyone. Throughout the evening, I caught him glancing nervously toward the entrance, checking his phone repeatedly. When I asked who he was expecting, he laughed too loudly and claimed he was monitoring a patient's lab results remotely. Later that night, while Kevin was in the bathroom, his phone lit up on the counter. I shouldn't have looked, but something compelled me. The message preview glowed mockingly. Asterisk missing you tonight. Can't wait until you're done playing doctor with the plain Jane. Last night was amazing. Same time this weekend. Asterisk. When Kevin returned, I held up his phone. You got a text. He snatched it quickly, glanced at the screen, and his face performed an impressive series of micro-expressions before settling on annoyed dismissal. Spam, he muttered, deleting the message. These scammers are getting more personal. I nodded as if I believed him, but something cracked permanently inside me that night. The perfume, the receipts, the earrings, the roommate comment, and now this text, they formed a pattern I could no longer ignore. At our next Friday dinner, my father noticed my distraction. You've barely touched your food, Arthur observed as we sat in his study afterward. What's wrong? For the first time, I confided my growing suspicions. With each example I shared, my father's expression darkened. I know you wanted to do this your way, he said finally, but I think it's time we learned exactly who this man is. I shook my head. I need to figure this out myself. Rachel. His tone was gentle but firm. Sometimes love blinds us to what's right in front of our eyes. 3 days later, an envelope appeared on my desk at the estate. Inside were photographs. Kevin entering a luxury high-rise in Brickell, the Avalon, one of Miami's most exclusive addresses. Additional photos showed him using a key card, clearly comfortable with the building. According to the private investigator's notes, he visited this location 3 times in the past week, staying overnight twice. He has an apartment there? I asked my father incredulously, spreading the photos across his desk. Not in his name, Arthur replied. The unit is leased to a shell company. My investigator is still tracing the ownership. I stared at the images, trying to reconcile them with the man who complained about my cheap apartment while apparently maintaining a secret residence in one of Miami's most expensive buildings. There's more, my father said quietly, sliding another photo across the desk. This one showed Kevin entering the building again, but not alone. A woman walked beside him, his arm around her waist. They were laughing about something. She was stunning, tall, elegantly dressed, entirely unfamiliar. The crack in my heart widened into a chasm. What are you going to do? Arthur asked. I gathered the photos carefully, my mind already calculating, planning. Nothing. Yet. Rachel. His graduation is in 3 weeks, I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. I think it's time I learned exactly what game Kevin is playing before I reveal my cards. I left my father's study with the envelope of evidence, the foundation of my carefully constructed reality crumbling beneath my feet. The woman I'd pretended to be was running out of reasons to keep pretending. The photos burned a hole in my desk drawer for 3 days while I wrestled with what to do next. Part of me wanted immediate confrontation, to throw the evidence in Kevin's face and watch him try to explain it away. But the strategist in me, the businesswoman who had learned patience from Arthur Mitchell himself, knew better. I needed the complete picture before making my move. My position in hospital administration gave me access to the scheduling system. I told myself it was just verification, not an invasion of privacy, when I logged in after hours and searched Kevin's rotation schedule. What I found made my stomach turn. Every Thursday afternoon for the past 4 months, Kevin had blocked an hour for a recurring patient appointment, a woman named Vanessa Reeves. The first red flag was the location, not the general clinic where residents typically saw patients, but a private consultation room in the East Wing. The second was the lack of notes in her file, unusual for a recurring patient. Social media filled in the blanks with brutal efficiency. Vanessa Reeves, pharmaceutical sales representative, her profile filled with Miami nightlife photos. And there, buried in her Instagram from just 2 weeks ago, a picture at a rooftop bar. Though Kevin wasn't tagged, I recognized his watch, his hand resting possessively on her lower back at the edge of the frame. My hands trembled as I closed the laptop. This wasn't just an affair. The calculated nature of it, using hospital resources, blocking official time, suggested something more deliberate. The next morning I made a decision. If I was going to understand what was happening, I needed to talk to someone who might have experienced the same thing. Someone who knew Kevin before me. Finding Autumn Sullivan wasn't difficult. She transferred to Baptist Health 2 years ago, around the time Kevin and I started dating. I sent her a simple email requesting a meeting about staffing coordination between hospitals, using my administrative role as cover. We met at a small cafe halfway between our hospitals. Autumn arrived looking professionally polished but wary, her red hair pulled back in a neat ponytail. Recognition flickered across her face when she saw me. "You're Kevin's fiancée," she said before I could introduce myself. "I've seen your picture on his desk." I nodded, suddenly unsure how to proceed. "I'm sorry for the pretense about hospital staffing." She studied me for a moment, then sighed. "What did he do?" The directness of her question caught me off guard. I think he's seeing someone else. Maybe multiple someones. "And you want to know if this is a pattern," she finished, signaling for coffee. "How much are you supporting him financially?" The question hit like a physical blow. "What do you mean?" "Tuition? Rent? Living expenses?" She wasn't being cruel, just matter of fact. For me it was about $30,000 over 18 months. I picked up extra shifts, maxed out credit cards. He said we were investing in our future. My throat tightened. "Why did you transfer hospitals?" "Because after I caught him with someone else, a pharmacy student named Bianca, he made my life unbearable. Told colleagues I was unstable, that I'd been stalking him after a brief fling." Her hands wrapped tightly around her mug. It was easier to start fresh than fight the rumors. "Did he?" I hesitated. "Did he ask for specific amounts?" "Regular payments." She looked at me sharply. $6,000 per term for tuition. Plus, emergencies. "How did you know?" The identical amount couldn't be coincidence. Just a hunch. Autumn leaned forward. "Listen, Rachel. Kevin isn't just a cheater. He's systematic. After we broke up, I found notes he'd kept about me, how much I made, my promotion timeline, even my parents' financial situation. Like I was an investment he was researching." My pulse quickened. "Do you know how to reach Bianca?" "She works for Meridian Pharmaceuticals now." Autumn pulled out her phone. "We keep in touch. Sort of a survivors group of 2. She smiled grimly. 3 counting you." Bianca agreed to meet us that same afternoon. She arrived looking like someone who had processed her anger and emerged stronger. Designer suit, confident stride, eyes that held compassion when they met mine. I funded his MCT prep course, she explained over iced tea. Paid for his applications to medical schools. Covered rent while he studied. Then suddenly I wasn't supportive enough of his dreams. 2 weeks later he was with Autumn, who had better hospital connections, Autumn added bitterly. And then he moved on to you, Bianca said gently, with your administrative position. I swallowed hard. How much did he take from you? About 20,000 all told. My first year's salary as a pharmaceutical rep. She shrugged, but I could see the lingering hurt. Expensive life lesson. As they shared their stories, the pattern became undeniable. Kevin hadn't just cheated. He'd developed a calculated system of financial exploitation, moving from woman to woman as they served their purpose, each unknowingly funding different stages of his medical career. The final piece fell into place that evening. I'd never deliberately searched Kevin's things before, but now I entered his campus office with cold determination. The top drawers held nothing unusual: medical journals, stethoscope, protein bars. The bottom drawer was locked, but the small key I'd found hidden in his desk lamp at home fit perfectly. Inside was a leather-bound journal. Not a diary, something far more chilling. Spreadsheets. Calculations. Names with detailed notes. Asterisk Bianca Martinez. Family middle class but stable. Salary $65,000 with commission potential. Good for initial med school expenses but limited long-term growth. Emotional attachment forming too quickly, becoming demanding about commitment. Timeline to transition. Complete. Autumn Sullivan. Hospital connections excellent. Nursing salary with overtime potential $75,000 plus. Professional growth path limited. Growing suspicious about finances. Timeline to transition. Complete. Rachel Mitchell. Admin position with growth potential. Extremely financially responsible. No family wealth visible but excellent money management. Completely trustworthy and non-questioning about financial support. Potential to support through residency. Timeline, 80% complete. My fingers trembled as I turned to the most recent entry. Vanessa Reeves. Family connections to Brickell Medical Community. Father on board at Miami Central. Income $90,000 plus with pharmaceutical bonuses. Family wealth significant. Already secured apartment access. Timeline to transition. Preparations complete, waiting for residency confirmation before finalizing. The final page contained a detailed chart, a literal investment portfolio of women with amounts extracted, time invested, and return on investment calculations. I was listed as his most successful investment to date, with over $140,000 contributed over 3 years. Below my name was a note that made my blood run cold. Engagement strategy working perfectly. No suspicion. Will maintain until residency secured through her hospital connections, then execute transition to Vanessa post-graduation. I photographed every page, my vision blurring with tears that I refused to shed. This wasn't just betrayal, it was predatory, clinical, sociopathic. When I replaced the journal and locked the drawer, something had fundamentally changed inside me. The hurt was still there but now surrounded by a cold, hard clarity. This wasn't about saving my relationship. It wasn't even about revenge exactly. This was about justice. As I drove home, I called Autumn and Bianca, asking them to meet again. Bring financial records, I said. Everything you can find about what you gave him. What are you planning? Bianca asked. Something fitting, I replied, my mind already calculating the precise architecture of Kevin's downfall. He's been investing in his future through us. I think it's time for his portfolio to crash. For the 2 weeks leading up to Kevin's graduation, I lived a strange double life within my already divided existence. By day, I continued playing the role of devoted fiancé, smiling through discussions about our future while secretly coordinating with Autumn and Bianca to document every dollar Kevin had extracted from us. By night, I made arrangements for what I still believed would be the moment my two worlds finally merged: Kevin's graduation celebration. The Ocean Terrace Hotel, one of Miami's most exclusive beachfront properties, wasn't the venue a hospital administrator making $900 monthly could possibly afford. I told Kevin it was funded through a special collection among hospital staff and his fellow graduates. A plausible explanation he accepted without question, too focused on his upcoming moment of glory to notice the impossibility of the math. In reality, I arranged everything through 3 different event planners, using shell companies linked to my trust but untraceable to the Mitchell name. The ballroom overlooking the Atlantic cost more for one night than my supposed annual salary, every crystal champagne flute and orchid centerpiece selected with care. This was to be the night that changed everything. I wanted it to be perfect, though for entirely different reasons than I'd originally planned. The irony wasn't lost on me as I dressed for the evening, selecting a simple blue dress that still maintained my modest means facade. The penthouse keys I'd intended to present to Kevin sat in my jewelry box, replaced in my evening clutch by copies of his damning journal entries and a small digital recorder. Kevin and I arrived separately. He went early for the graduate procession while I came later for the reception. The moment I entered the glittering ballroom, I sensed something was off. Conversations stuttered as I passed. Glances were exchanged, followed by whispers. A woman I didn't recognize studied me with barely concealed amusement before turning to her companion with a comment that sparked uncomfortable laughter. Kevin stood across the room in his graduation regalia, surrounded by admirers, his mother Diana at his side. She'd flown in from Boston specifically for the ceremony, the first time we'd met in person despite our 3-year engagement. When Kevin spotted me, his smile faltered almost imperceptibly before recovering. He waved but made no move to approach or introduce me to the group around him. For 30 minutes, I circulated solo through the party I'd arranged and paid for, making polite conversation while watching Kevin and Diana deliberately work the room in patterns that somehow never intersected with mine. Each time I approached, they would mysteriously shift to another conversation cluster. "You must be Rachel," a voice finally said behind me. I turned to find Diana Blackwood, Kevin's mother, appraising me with cool calculation. Up close, I could see where Kevin had inherited his charm, and his ability to mask true intentions behind a pleasant expression. "Mrs. Blackwood, I'm so happy to finally meet you," I replied, extending my hand. She took it briefly, her grip limp and dismissive. "Kevin tells me you work in the billing department or something." "Hospital administration," I corrected gently. "How nice." Her tone suggested it was anything but. I always admire people who are content with modest achievements. Before I could respond, she glanced over my shoulder and brightened artificially. "Oh, I simply must say hello to the Hendersons. Kevin mentioned they might have an opening in their practice." She touched my arm with cold fingers. "We'll catch up properly later, dear." She disappeared into the crowd, leaving me with the distinct impression I'd been assessed and found wanting. I hadn't expected warmth from Kevin's mother, but such naked disdain was surprising, especially since, according to my fictional backstory, I was the supportive girlfriend who had helped fund her son's education. As the evening progressed, Kevin continued his strange avoidance, making brief appearances at my side only when it seemed too obvious that we weren't interacting. During one such moment, his phone buzzed with a text that made him frown. "Everything okay?" I asked. "Just a patient concern," he replied smoothly. "Nothing urgent." I knew he was lying. Residents didn't manage independent patient concerns, especially not on graduation night. 10 minutes later, he excused himself to the restroom for the 3rd time that hour. Something compelled me to follow him, maintaining a discreet distance. Instead of turning toward the restrooms, Kevin slipped down a service corridor that led to a small terrace overlooking the ocean. Diana was already waiting there. I positioned myself just inside the doorway, hidden by a decorative palm. Their voices carried clearly in the night air. "She's starting to notice something's wrong," Kevin was saying. "I need to be careful these last few weeks." Diana scoffed. "I don't understand why you're dragging this out. The girl is obviously beneath you. No family connections, mediocre job, not even particularly attractive." "She thinks we're getting married next spring," Kevin replied. "I need to maintain that until my residency position is confirmed. Her supervisor is on the placement committee." "And Vanessa?" "She's getting impatient." "It's under control. Her father's already hinted he can get me into the cardiology fellowship track directly. Just another month at most." I felt oddly calm as I listened, as if I were observing a scene in a movie rather than the dissolution of my own relationship. "Her salary's not great, but every dollar helps," Kevin continued. "Once I'm settled at Miami Central, I'll break things off. Tell her I need to focus on my career." Diana laughed. You've always been good at managing your investments. Yes, Mom, I've already lined up someone better. Rachel's just investment material, not family material. The words should have hurt, but instead they simply confirmed what I already knew. I stepped back, intending to retreat before they returned inside, but collided with a waiter. His tray of empty glasses clattered to the carpet. Kevin and Diana turned sharply at the noise. For a moment no one spoke. The look of panic that crossed Kevin's face was almost worth the 3 years of deception. I straightened my shoulders and walked directly toward them, my heart pounding but my expression perfectly composed. Diana recovered first, her face transforming into a mask of social politeness. Rachel, dear, we were just coming to find you, she lied smoothly. I looked at Kevin, whose expression was cycling rapidly through shock, calculation, and damage control. How much did you hear? He finally asked. Enough. I took another step toward them, and something in my expression must have alarmed Kevin. He glanced around, spotting a security guard patrolling the terrace perimeter. With a subtle gesture, he beckoned the man over. Is there a problem here, sir? The guard asked. Kevin's transformation was immediate and complete. Gone was any trace of the panic-stricken man caught in a lie. In his place stood a confident young doctor, radiating authority. Yes, he said calmly. She doesn't belong here. Could you please escort her out? The guard looked confused, glancing between us. Sir. Diana laughed, then a sound like breaking glass. You thought you were part of this family? Oh, honey. Other guests had begun to notice the commotion, turning to stare. I felt their eyes like physical touches, curious, pitying, entertained by the unexpected drama. In that crystallizing moment of public humiliation, with 3 years of lies exposed under the glittering chandeliers of a party I had secretly funded, I made a decision that would alter everything that followed. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't expose Kevin's scheme or reveal my true identity. Instead, I smiled. With deliberate calm, I removed the modest engagement ring from my finger. The ring he'd claimed had cleaned out his savings, but that I now knew had likely been purchased with another woman's money. I held it up to the light for a moment, then dropped it with a soft clink into Kevin's champagne glass. Congratulations on your graduation, Dr. Blackwood, I said evenly. I wish you exactly the future you deserve. Then I turned and walked out, my head high, my steps measured, ignoring the whispers that followed me across the ballroom. Not a single tear fell until I was safely inside my car, the door closed against the world. Only then did I permit myself one moment of pure raw grief for the relationship I had thought was real. One moment to mourn the love that had never existed. Then I dried my eyes, started the engine, and began mentally calculating exactly how to dismantle Kevin Blackwood's carefully constructed future. I didn't drive to my small apartment that night. There was no reason to maintain the charade any longer. Instead, I drove directly to the waterfront high-rise where my actual residence waited. A penthouse overlooking Biscayne Bay that I'd purchased 3 years earlier but rarely used, maintaining it only as a convenient meeting place for business associates who couldn't know about my dual identity. The doorman's eyes widened slightly as I stepped from my modest Honda rather than the usual town car. Good evening, Ms. Mitchell. It's been some time. Hello, George. I'll be staying here full-time now. Very good, ma'am. Shall I have your things brought up from the car? I shook my head. There's nothing there I need anymore. The private elevator whisked me to the top floor. When the doors opened directly into my foyer, the contrast from the cramped apartment I'd shared with Kevin was startling. Expansive windows showcased Miami's glittering skyline. Modern art adorned walls that soared to 16-foot ceilings. Everything gleamed with the quiet luxury of a space designed for someone who never needed to display their wealth to feel its worth. I kicked off my heels and walked barefoot across cool marble to the master bathroom, peeling away my affordable blue dress as I went. The scalding shower I stepped into felt like a ritual cleansing, washing away not just the evening's humiliation but 3 years of deliberate diminishment. As hot water pounded against my skin, I allowed myself exactly 10 minutes of grief. 10 minutes to mourn not just Kevin, who had never been the man I thought, but the dream he had represented. The possibility of being loved for myself rather than my family name or fortune. When I emerged wrapped in a plush robe, my skin flushed pink from the heat, I was transformed. The meek administrator was gone. In her place stood Rachel Mitchell, daughter of Arthur Mitchell, heir to a real estate empire, and a businesswoman formidable in her own right. I ignored the 17 missed calls and 29 text messages from Kevin, each one more desperate than the last as he realized what his casual cruelty might cost him. Is that I made a different call. Dad? It's me. You were right. I'm ready to be a Mitchell again. The plan came together with clinical precision over the next 48 hours. I didn't waste energy on dramatic gestures or emotional outbursts. Kevin had treated me like a business investment. I would return the favor by systematically dismantling the future he'd built on the backs of the women he'd exploited. My first official move came Monday morning. Rather than reporting to my modest administrative office, I walked into the executive suite of Miami General Hospital and requested a meeting with Dr. Harold Winters, chairman of the board. Rachel, he greeted me warmly, rising from behind his desk. We'd met at numerous charity functions over the years, though he'd never connected me with the hospital employee who shared my name. Your father mentioned you might be stopping by. What can I do for you? I placed a slim folder on his desk. I'd like to introduce myself properly, Dr. Winters. I'm Rachel Mitchell, daughter of Arthur Mitchell, and as of this morning, majority stakeholder in the Coastal Medical Group. His eyebrows rose sharply. The Coastal Medical Group was the parent company that operated 3 major hospitals in the Miami area, including Miami General. I've actually been working in administration here for 3 years, I continued calmly. Learning the business from the ground up, you might say. I had no idea, he managed, clearly recalibrating his understanding of who exactly sat before him. Few people did. That was intentional. I opened the folder, revealing a document with the hospital logo. I believe this is the Residency Placement Committee's current recommendation list. I'd like to discuss some concerns I have about one of the candidates, Dr. Kevin Blackwood. By the time I left Dr. Winters' office, Kevin's carefully orchestrated future at Miami General had evaporated. No scene, no drama, just the quiet power of influence properly applied. My next stop was the office of Patricia Alvarez, one of Miami's most respected attorneys specializing in financial fraud. The pattern is clear, she noted, reviewing the documentation I'd compiled with Autumn and Bianca. This isn't just a moral failing, it's potentially criminal. He deliberately misrepresented his intentions to secure financial support from multiple women. I'm not interested in criminal charges, I clarified. That would be too public, too messy. I want restitution for Autumn and Bianca. And I want it handled quietly but completely. And for yourself? She asked. I smiled. I have other plans for my own restitution. While Patricia began preparing the legal groundwork, I turned my attention to Diana Blackwood. Kevin's mother operated a boutique real estate agency in Boston specializing in luxury properties, maintaining a satellite office in Miami to capture wealthy snowbirds looking for winter homes. Her business depended almost entirely on referrals from developers and property managers, precisely the network that formed the core of Mitchell Properties' influence. One phone call to my father was all it took. She humiliated you publicly, Arthur said grimly after I explained the situation. That's not something we forget. No dramatic moves, I cautioned. Nothing that could be traced back to us. Rachel, I've been handling delicate business situations since before you were born. By this time next month, Diana Blackwood will be wondering why her phone stopped ringing. Kevin's increasingly frantic messages continued throughout the week. At first demanding explanations, then offering apologies, eventually descending into thinly veiled threats about making me sorry if I'd damaged his reputation with Dr. Winters. I saved every communication without responding, adding them to Patricia's growing file. When my doorman called to inform me that Kevin was in the lobby demanding to see me, I finally broke my silence with a single text. *, you've confused me with someone who still cares what you have to say. That woman no longer exists. *. 3 months passed in a blur of careful, deliberate action. I accepted the position my father had long held open for me, financial director of the Mitchell Foundation, which happened to be the largest private donor to the Miami Medical Foundation. Autumn received a settlement for her financial losses plus damages, allowing her to clear the debt she'd accumulated supporting Kevin. Bianca's settlement funded the launch of her own pharmaceutical consulting firm. Diana Blackwood quietly closed her Miami office after her client list mysteriously evaporated. The Miami Medical Foundation's annual gala was held at the Ritz-Carlton on a perfect October evening. I arrived on my father's arm wearing a Valentino gown that cost more than Kevin's monthly resident salary would have been, had he secured the position he'd been counting on. When Dr. Winters introduced me to the assembled medical elite as Rachel Mitchell, our new foundation financial director and the visionary behind our expanded residency grant program, the whispers spread through the room like wildfire. And then I saw him, standing near the bar in a rented tuxedo, his expression stunned as the pieces finally clicked into place. Kevin had managed to secure a residency position at a small community hospital in North Miami, the only program that would accept him after his mysteriously withdrawn recommendations from Miami General. I held his gaze across the crowded ballroom, neither smiling nor frowning, simply acknowledging his presence with the cool assessment of someone evaluating an underperforming investment. In that moment, I watched understanding dawn on his face, the crushing realization that the woman he had discarded as just investment material now controlled not just his residency placement but his entire professional future in Miami's medical community. I raised my champagne glass slightly in his direction before turning away to greet the chief of cardiology, effectively dismissing Kevin from my attention. The soft gasp from Diana Blackwood, who stood nearby witnessing the exchange, was just audible enough to reach my ears. "She doesn't belong here," he had said. How wrong he had been. That's the end of Rachel's journey from deception to justice. If this story of sweet revenge touched you, please hit subscribe. It takes just a second and helps our channel grow. Drop a like if you cheered when Kevin realized who Rachel really was, and tell me in the comments, what was your favorite part? Was it when she discovered his journal, when she dropped her ring in his champagne, or when she reclaimed her power at the gala? I'd love to know your thoughts.